How's everyone doing today? So in this video, I am going to be going through with you step by step, creating the Chapter 2 graphical user interface for the latte selection application. So this is in the book, it's on page 65. Um, in the online version of the document, it's the page numbers don't correspond, so you're going to be looking for 2-6. So everything I assign to you um, from this book in Visual Basic, you're going to get a requirements document. So this is pretty much the requirements document for the latte selection application. Um, if you listen to my last video presentation on Chapter 2, um, we talked a little bit about what the latte selection application is going to look like. Basically, you have two picture boxes with one's a picture of a pumpkin spice latte and the other one's a mocha latte. You can toggle between the two, select one, and then exit out. It's a very simple little application, but it's going to get you accustomed to GUI design. A lot of this algorithm and processing conditions, that's going to be, you're going to worry about that in the next chapter. So in this chapter, we're just going to be designing the GUIs. In the next chapter, we're going to add code to them. Okay. Um, I think I have image over on the next page of what the GUI is going to look like when we're done. And it should look very similar to this. Depending on your creativity, it might look a little different. You might have the spacing um, a little different than what they have, but pretty much that's what it should look like. So I'm going to minimize this and start Visual Studio, and I'm going to be going through a paper copy of the book as I go through this with you. So if you hear me flipping pages, that's what it is. Since I'm working on a laptop, I don't have two computers with me, so I'll just be going through that way. So, okay, I'm going to start Visual Studio. I have it pinned to my taskbar here, but you can search for Visual Studio 2017. Make sure you're running Visual Studio 2017, not Visual Studio Code. So I'm going to start it up. If you're running it for the first time, there's a couple things you'll have to set up. The first thing it's going to ask you is to log in with your Microsoft account. If you don't have a Microsoft account, don't worry about it. You can skip this step. All this will do is when you set your settings up in Visual Studio, it will allow you to, those settings will sync across computers. So if you log in both places, a lot of those settings will sync. I'm not going to worry about that now. I'm just going to say later. Okay, this is kind of important. First thing here, your development settings. You want to set your development settings to Visual Basic. And your color scheme doesn't matter. That's really up to you what you select. I'm going to select dark because it's easier on the eyes, I think. But whichever one you choose, you can try different ones and play around with them. So I'm going to start Visual Studio. It'll just take a few minutes to set it up for our first use. Shouldn't take too long. These computers are very fast. All right, here we go. So we get this kind of splash screen here, and we're going to start a new project. So I'm going to go File, New Project, and then I get a selection here for the type of application I want. I'm going to click on Windows Desktop and Windows Form Application. Okay, and you'll notice when I click that, it gives me an opportunity right here to name it. Okay, so I am going to give it a name here. I was typing on the wrong keyboard. Of latte selection. I'm going to hit OK. And it's going to create the project for me. So the first thing I want to do before I get started is pin my toolbox. When you select it, it's probably going to take a minute to initialize. It's going to load up all our tools that we're going to use here. And we want to use a common control. And I'm going to pin it so it'll stay there. So you just click this pin button and that will pin it to the screen for you. Okay, so now we have our this is our Visual Studio interface. So this is our work area. This is our form where we're going to be designing everything. This is where it's a toolbox with all our controls. You see the labels and the picture box. And this is our Solution Explorer. This is where my project and my solution is. And this is my properties. Okay, so the first thing I want to do here is name my Windows form object. So when it creates the first form, when you create your first form in Visual Studio, it's going to give it a name of Form 1. We do not want our forms or our screens in Visual Studio to be called Form 1, Form 2, Form 3. They should be named something descriptive. So this is a latte selection application. So I'm going to rename this. Just right click on it and rename. But what you want to be careful of when you're renaming this is make sure you do not remove the .vb extension when you rename it. Okay. So I'm going to name it lowercase frm LA. So then we do uppercase LATTE selection. And this way of naming is pretty common in programming. The first three characters is a descriptive of the type of object. So this is a form. So the first three characters are lowercase frm, and each object type has its own first three-letter descriptor for the object. And then your next section is just a description of what this is. So it's the title of our form, latte selection. You'll notice I don't put spaces in the file name here. I just capitalize the first letter instead of putting a space. Okay, so now I'll click off that and I have renamed my form. The other thing probably going to want to do is take a look through these properties here. Okay, we have a lot of different properties. And you'll notice, even though I've renamed the form, the title on the taskbar still says Form 1. Okay, that's the text value right here. So in that screen, I want to change the text value here to latte selection here. So here we can use spaces because that's a title that's going to show up on our form. So I'm just going to change this to latte space selection. And you'll notice that will change. Okay. The next thing we want to do is we want to resize our form. We want it to be kind of more square, and there's a couple ways to do that. The first way we can resize it is just when you hover over these handles here, you can click and drag it to make it a different size, bigger or smaller. And you'll notice when I'm clicking and dragging here, the size changes here. So that's the other way I can change the size of this form. So the instructions are telling me it should be 730 by 700. So I can just go in here, change this to 730, change this to 700. Okay, and that's what they're looking for the size of the form. Pretty simple so far. So we've got our naming convention, we've got our form size, we've got our title on the form. And now we want to start adding our labels. So the first label is the title that we're going to put on top. So I'm going to click and drag on the label on the toolbox and just put it out in the form for me. Okay, you can just put it anywhere. We're going to move it and center it later. So this is our heading. So we're going to change the name of this label to label heading. So when I click on the form, I'm getting the form properties here. When I click on the label, you'll notice the properties change. I get the label properties. So I'm going to look for the name here. It's label 1. So I'm going to change that. Naming convention for labels is lowercase LBL and then heading. Okay. We want to change the text property so it doesn't say label 1 anymore to latte selection, just like we have in the title bar. So I'm going to scroll down in my properties, select the label first, scroll down in my properties, and look for the text property. It says label 1. Change that to latte selection. It changes the value there. That's our text property. So since this is heading, we want to make it bigger and make it stand out. So we're gonna do that. So click on this again, and we want to change the font. So I'm going to click on the font here, click on the 3 ellipses, and this will bring up our font dialog box. Let's see what it wants us to change it to. It wants us to change it to Tahoma. It doesn't really matter what you select here. And so we're going to say Tahoma, and it wants the font style to be bold, and it wants the font size to be 16 points. So it shows us a little sample here. We hit OK, and now we have a nice big latte selection label. So the next thing we want to do is center this across our screen. Now I can click and drag this and put it pretty much in the center, but it's probably not exact. I'm just eyeballing it. But we do have a tool within here for centering things. So if I click on the format menu, and I have all these different options for alignment, and you'll see this one, center and form. So I can center and form horizontally and vertically. So I want to center this one vertically. So let's try it again. Let's say it wasn't centered. I had it pretty close, so you couldn't really see it change. So I'll put it right here because I want it pretty close to the top. Format, center and form, not vertically puts it there. So we want it horizontally. Format, center and form, horizontally, and it puts that label right in the middle of the form for us. Now, if I resize this form, this would not move. It would all of a sudden not be in the center anymore. So that's something to be aware of. The next thing we want to do is add our picture box objects. So we're going to find our picture box. We're going to drag it out into the screen. And we're going to give our picture box a name. So right now it's called Picture Box 1. And I want to call it, naming convention for picture boxes are PIC, so lowercase PIC. And this is our pumpkin spice picture box. So I'm just going to just call this one pumpkin. Okay. This is a picture box, so there's no text property. We're going to add the pictures in the next chapter, so no coding that way. We're going to resize the picture box. It says the picture box should be 300 by 250. So I could eyeball it, but let's be exact, and we will make it according to specifications. 300 by 250. Okay. Now we have our picture box. I'm going to move it over a little bit. And then we want to add a second picture box object. So I'm just going to grab another one, throw it over here. And this is our mocha. So we're going to name this one. What do you think? Pick mocha. Click on that one. It is again called picture box 1 because I renamed the other one. Change the name to PICMOCA. Okay. So we could go in and change the size of this one too, but there's a little bit of an easier way to do that. Say we were adding 5 or 6 different picture boxes, it would be a pain to select all of them. So what we can do is we can select this first picture box, hold down the Shift key, select the second picture box, and then we go to our handy dandy format button and say make same size. We can say width, height, or both. So now these two picture boxes are both the exact same size. Okay. The other thing we want to do is align these picture boxes horizontally. Okay. So just read through what it wants us to do here. So to do that, we are going to align the bottoms of the picture box. So we're going to select both picture boxes. They should already be selected. Format, align, and bottoms. Okay. So now we can move these over since they're both selected, or we can just move one over to get them. I'll unselect them. So now that they're both together, what we really want to do is get the spacing here, here, and here about the same. So you're going to kind of have to eyeball it, but once you get a good idea of how it is, you'll see when you start dragging them, kind of stay together here. So I'm just going to kind of eyeball the space here. Then I'm going to select them both again together. Go to Format and Center and Form horizontally again. Okay. So now I have my two picture boxes, about a similar space here and here. GUI wise, that looks pretty good to me. So the next thing we're going to do is add our buttons. We're going to have 3 buttons. We have a mocha button, a select button, and a pumpkin button. So let's go ahead and throw our 3 buttons on the screen. Button 1, button 2, button 3. So our first one is going to be naming conventions for buttons are BTN. Pumpkin. Second one is BTN select. And the third one is BTN Okay. Okay. Another reason why doing naming conventions is so important. It's gonna make it easier for you when you start coding because you'll know um, what object or button you're referencing. Because if these were called button 1, button 2, and button 3 in your code, you'd have to remember that, okay, button 1 was pumpkin, button 2 was select, and button 3 was mocha. And when you get 20 buttons on the screen, it's going to be impossible to do that. So the naming conventions are very, very important. So we're going to change the text property of these buttons as well. So our first one, our text property is pumpkin spice. Our second one, text property is select. And our third one, our text property is mocha. Okay. Actually, this one is supposed to be select latte, not just select. Okay. So what we want to do, so what happened here is it's just showing select because the button isn't big enough. So if I resize this and make it a little bigger, then I can see the whole select latte. So I'm going to select this one and then select the other two and go to Tools, not Tools, Format, make same size, both, and this will make our buttons the same size. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to center this one, and there's a couple ways we could center these. I like to have my buttons centered across the picture box. Um, so you can eyeball it. There's different ways of doing it. Like I mentioned in my walkthrough or my presentation, GUI design isn't my strong suit. It isn't something I do a whole lot of in my career. But you know, I can do it. Not great, but I can do it. So let's select these again. So a couple ways to select them. Format, center and form, horizontally, make sure they're in the middle. So now this one is in the middle of the form. This one is in the middle of this picture box, and this one's in the middle of this picture box. Okay. So we got a couple more. If you remember from the the mock-up and the requirements, there's a couple more labels here. We have a label with instructions, and we have a label with a message. Okay. So we're going to add another label here to the form. That's going to be our instructions label. So we're going to name this one LBL instructions. And then we're going to change the text property on this one. What is it supposed to say? So this says choose a latte flavor. And then click the select latte button. Okay, so we can click on this, format, center and form horizontally. So that's pretty much centered for us. It says that we want to change the font to Tahoma and 9 points, so we'll click on it again. We will go to our font. Easier if I just click on the T, Tahoma. Just make it a little bigger, 9. Let's go to format and center and form again, horizontally. Okay, so we've got that. And then we've got another label down here, which is just our message. And this one is our confirmation label. So we're going to call this one LBL confirmation. I'm sure I'm spelling that correctly. Spelling is important when you're doing naming conventions, not so much on naming conventions as it is on the spelling of your labels and your form. The last thing you ever want to do is push an application out to a production environment that has a spelling mistake on it. That's usually there's going to be a testing department that will catch those things, but you have to be very careful about that. So we got label confirmation, and then I'm going to change my text value down here to enjoy your latte selection. Okay, we're going to center that, format, center and form horizontally. Good. And it wants us to change the font on this one as well, so we'll do that. Again, we're going with, just type a T in there, Tahoma, and it wants it Tahoma 9 again. Okay. Label, format, center and form horizontally. Just change it a little bit. We just have one more thing to do on this, and this is add our exit button. So we're going to put another button in here. So in the description, they want me to name this exit window. That's too much text for me. I'm not going to do that. It's just going to be exit. So I'm going to call this BTN exit. And the text value is going to be exit. Okay. Format, center and form horizontally. So there we have it. We have our first GUI design created. Now, is this GUI perfect? It's okay. I mean, when I'm looking at GUIs, I'm looking for consistent spacing. Okay, so spacing here, here, and here should be similar. Here, 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 here should be similar. Got a little bit more space there, so maybe I'll move this up a little bit. Maybe I can make my button a little bigger. Okay, so I'm going to do select my select latte, and then I'm going to select this one, and I'm going to say format, make same size, height and width. And then I'm going to line these two guys up. Okay, that looks a little better. Okay, so that's basically it. That's what we have for our GUI. The last thing we want to make sure we do is save. Okay, so when we're saving, we're going to select Save All. Important thing here is the location. Okay, we want to make our location our flash drive. Okay, so I'm going to go over here, Visual Basic, and I already have, if you don't have this already, you're going to have to go out and create a folder structure. So when you're saving your projects, I want you to be very organized. So all your Chapter 2 cases are going to go in a Chapter 2 folder. Okay, so in Chapter 2, and then here, we're going to give it a name of folder. Let's try that again. Browse, go to my flash drive, Visual Basic, Chapter 2, select folder. There we go. So now our name is Latte Selection. It's going to create a directory for the solution, and we're going to hit save. Okay, so that saves it for us. Before we do anything else, I want to do one thing. I just want to run this and compile it just to make sure there's no errors. There shouldn't be any errors right now because I haven't written any code yet, but we just want to run it just to be safe, just to make sure there's nothing going on with it. So my build succeeded, and what it'll do is it'll just run the application for us. And obviously this isn't going to do anything, right? There's no code behind it, so we can just close it. Okay, that's that. Another thing you might want to do before you finish up and close out is you'll notice here there's a drop down. Okay, so if I click on this drop down, I see all of my objects that I added to the application. Okay, so this is a good place to check if you missed any naming conventions. If I put one of these labels in and I forgot to give it a naming convention, I would see that very easily here. So this is a good last check for you to do. Okay, I'm just going to save this one more time. Make sure when you're saving, you select Save All. You don't want to be just saving the form, or that can cause you a lot of problems. So make sure you're selecting Save All to save everything. So I'm going to go out and I'm going to show you where this got saved, so you see why it's important to do a Save All, because it's when you save a Visual Basic project, it's not just one file; it's a series of different files. So I'm going to exit out of here. And then I'm going to go out to my flash drive, Visual Basic folder, Chapter 2, and we have Latte Selection here. And then we have, this is our solution file, and this is our folder where we created the Latte Selection. So I can open that and look at all the stuff it created. A lot of this stuff is so if you were programming in Java, you'd have to create for the GUI, you'd have to create code for that. Visual Basic has done that all for us. But then there's all these other folders. We've got this bin folder and a debug folder. And in here, when I compiled it, it created this folder and it created an actual program that I can double click on and run. So this is an executable file that you can take and bring to another computer that has the .NET framework on it and run it anywhere as long as a .NET framework is on there. bring this back up again. So make sure you have a folder structure. There's nothing in chapter 1, but in chapter 2, you're going to have folders for your latte selection and then some of the other cases that we're going through. And organization is going to be one of the things I'm going to be grading you on. I'm going to show you something I have here. When I give you the assignments, when I post them in Google Classroom, I'm going to post it as a spreadsheet. That it's actually going to be this spreadsheet exactly, but there'll be something like this for each chapter. So what I give you here is a mastery objective, what we're doing in the chapter. So we're learning to build Windows applications using proper naming conventions and graphical user interface principles. Then I have the frameworks. This is kind of just from my own reasons to track what we're covering from the Massachusetts frameworks, because I have to, at the end of each quarter, record what you guys have learned in each of the chapters. And then I'm going to list out the cases that you're going to be graded on. Okay, I'm not going to grade you on the chapter walkthrough because you're just copying out of a book. With these, you're going to be taking what you've learned and extending it a little bit. And on case 6, you're going to be extending it a lot because it's a lot more complicated. I've had students in the past that skip over the chapter walkthrough because I'm not grading it. I highly recommend you don't do that. You really should be going through the guided program development. It's important because that will give you a template moving forward that you'll be able to use for doing the future cases. So this is what I'm grading you on, specifications. So this means when you read through the requirements document is everything that was in the requirements document in your graphical user interface. I'm going to be looking at all your naming conventions to make sure they're all there and they're appropriate. I'm going to be looking for good GUI design principles. Some of you are going to be better at this than others. I'm not great at it. That's okay. I'm not going to beat anyone up really bad on, if you're not good at GUI design. And the last thing I'm going to be grading you on is organization. So I want to see that folder structure. I want to see things named appropriately and consistently. Okay, and this is something we'll work on. The nice thing about this chapter is we're going to be pretty much doing the same cases in chapter 3. We're just going to be adding code into them. So if when I'm going through your cases, I find some issues with your naming conventions or GUI design principles, you'll be able to correct them. And then when I grade it again for chapter 3, you'll have a much better grade. All right. So that's about it. All I have for today. Of course, if you have any questions, reach out to me. Have a good day.